Believing the divine versus knowing the divine and programmed to worship. I put these all together for an important reason, because society and religion tend to hype the word believe. And it's an attempt of socially engineering people. And they're trying to close the connection to our own divinity by hyping up this word believe. Often it's believe, have faith, right? While the mystic bypasses these programs and they're in touch with their inner knowing. So maybe you bought the program in the past, but somehow you've been able to bypass this. Now we want to continue to grow on this, though. We don't just want to leave it at that. So you also want to think about it like, if you had to rely on someone for the sake of your survival, would you go to the person who says, I believe I can help you, I believe I can save your life? Or would you go to the person that says, I know I can save your life? And so you want to have that type of dialogue and understanding with yourself as well. You want to show up for yourself in that knowing, that ultimate inner knowing. And starting to practice animism is a bridge to kind of gap that and to really start to clean out that programming so you can fully show up for yourself. And also keep track of the inner mental chatter as well, and the thoughts, because you should have this deep knowing of your power and your place in this realm. So practicing animism, I'm going to show you guys different ways to do this in nature later on in the lecture. But I want you to start also thinking, how are you already doing this? How have you already been seeing the soul essence and things around you that others may look at as inanimate, as just an object? You can even look at that with our pets as well. You know, our dogs, we look at them we hold them on this pedestal as if they're another person. And that's because we feel their soul essence. The animist knows because they are consistently experiencing this firsthand. They're experiencing the magic firsthand. So it's a very experiential type of process, animism. Now, I mentioned animism is not a religion. I believe I mentioned it. So it's not a religion whatsoever. There is no worship in animism. However, religions did pick up animistic practices, just like they picked up ritualistic practices as well. Animistic practices are found throughout all religions, but not too much, because they don't let you explore that deep into those mystical realms. So they let you just dig in just enough to where people can have these types of eye-opening experiences and then believe it's because of their religion. So magical practitioners also who approach their magic through an animistic lens rely on their own power and the potential to collaborate with an elemental spirit is always available to them because they have a relationship that tends to be a healthy relationship. We're talking about a magical practitioner that uses their magic for the betterment of the environment and of everyone. So when they feel inclined to work with these spirits, they will, but they don't depend on them. They don't worship them. They're not externalizing their power to something else. Whereas a dark magician, on the other hand, would be doing the opposite. They would be relying on an external soul essence or an external entity to supply him with the power. But at the end of the day, it's not serving anyone else except whom they're working with. It's not even serving themselves. And so the animistic approach allows you to create, and it allows you to enhance your own power as well. So animism has not been practiced all the time because people are programmed to worship. So just remember that there's a lot of gaslighting that goes on with these types of practices, and when you try to share your knowledge with people, and we'll talk about that later as well. And I think that's the main thing, is this program of having to worship and of just believing has really kept animism more so in our ancestors' type of society. And it just never crossed over after religion took over. And after the pagan religions were pretty much demolished by Christianity and all of that. So This is the revival, basically. And I really like this. It is not primitive. It is, in fact, pure awareness. So soul essence is what animates our body. It's what animates everything around us. It gives us expression, dynamic movement. It animates animals, and it animates the natural world around you as well. So when you look at a person who has encountered soul loss, significant soul loss, right? They tend to be very rigid. They tend to shuffle when they walk. They tend to not have flexibility in every sense of the word. So a lot of times in nature, you might notice certain areas are very dense and they don't seem animated. That is because the same thing can happen in the environment as well. It can be abused and it can suffer from trauma, and it can be stripped of its magic from the external false reality. That's what it tends to do. But you've all seen it outside when the trees are swaying and the sky is illuminated, the sun's burning everything out that doesn't need to be there, and the butterflies are dancing around your field. It's this magnetizing, animated experience. But most people are so disconnected that they don't pay attention to their state of natural realm around them. So they're not even conscious of this. So the the animistic lifestyle is not for everyone. It is for us divine sparks who recognize these types of fluctuations in the energy, and we can recognize when there's pain behind things, and we can recognize when there's beauty behind things. And just because you see the world through an animistic lens does not mean that everything is actually fully activated. And so it's up to you to really start decoding the reality around you. Yeah, so kind of back to the religion aspect here. They deem themselves sophisticated and they deem themselves as modern. So they actually took the word primitive and used it against people of the earth, the guardians of the earth. And they used it in a very negative connotation, to where now if something is primitive as a sophisticated organization, then it gives you an excuse to destroy something and to murder, essentially. So the keepers of the land were taken down, and the earth has suffered since. Just as much as we rely on the earth, there is a connection with earth and us as people, because we are nature and nature is us. We are intertwined. So while not all elements in nature possess animation, every object can serve as an anchor point for energies to express themselves. How do we discern life force, vital essence, and energy? This question unveils the essence of our exploration. So that's what I had just mentioned. As the person who wants to really be of service in this reality and be a part of nature and restore nature, it's up to you to be very keenly aware of the different types of energies out there. Energies permeate landscapes and elemental forces like wind, bearing tales of distant lands. A landscape rich with hills, rivers, and animals is alive, a sentient panorama. When engaging in such living landscapes, approach and intention are everything. Much like humans, they bear attitudes, behaviors, and self-awareness. Your initial recognition and reaction hold the power to sway their response. These energies are often beyond human comprehension, yet if approached with empowerment rather than domination, they may share their secrets, extend their power, and engaged in reasoned discourse. So a lot of the traditional animistic indigenous cultures, most of their time communicating with nature was to appease to nature. They lived in remote areas and needed the support of the elemental allies around them. So they did a lot of offerings to the river spirits, to the tree spirits, to the cave spirits, to whatever was in their landscape. And it wasn't always approached in a way as we're going to discuss today, where it was to find self-empowerment for mystical transcendence. It was more of a lifestyle for them to survive, because many of these indigenous cultures lived under strenuous conditions a lot of the times. And so for generations and generations, they continued cultivating these relationships to continue protecting their tribe. It's paramount to realize that just this connection thrives only through nurturing. Just as relationships with fellow humans falter without care, so too do connections within the animistic realm. Our contemporary lives often distance us from these truths, as we've not all been born into indigenous animalistic societies. So exactly, this is the one thing I always try to talk to people about is, first and foremost, show up for yourself, because you're not going to show up for anyone else fully unless you're showing up for yourself. And the same thing, you're not going to tap into this elemental magic. You're not going to uncover how deep it actually is, because it is ancient magic. It's deep within you. You're not going to be able to crack those codes. It's important to remember that depending on the external environment as well, they go through their own waves and their phases too. The spirits have personalities and they're not always going to be fixed. So it depends on these variables I'm mentioning here, including external passing through energies, because in our modern day society, these energies constantly get bombarded and they get basically trampled over. So it's almost like even when you're trying to build something good, something could sweep right in and clear it out. And they get attacked. Nature spirits get attacked by modern society, by the false grid layovers that they have placed over most of this land, most of the earth realm. And so they're not always going to be active either. They might have to go dormant for some time. You might go and say, what's going on outside today? And it continues for a few days. Sometimes they have to go dormant. They could be under attack. They can be angry as well. So, they might have negative energy dumped on them and you're not aware of it. But if you're in tune with nature, you're going to know something happened, something went down. They're not behaving the same. It's not the same outside. So these grids can become extremely polluted. Just because it's in nature does not mean that it cannot be polluted. They attack every sort of grid they can. And the astral realm is equally, if not more, polluted than what we see in the physical realm. Sophianic animism. So you might be wondering, where does Sophia fit into this, right? We talk a lot about Sophianic intelligence. The news had a 3-part lecture on the fallen goddess scenario. And I was reading inside, Not in His Image, John Lamb Lash, his book. And actually, he talked about animism as well. And it does fit in perfectly. This all fits in. So Gnostic teachings highlight that the Earth's consciousness stands as clear proof of Sophia's potent force in animating Aeonic dreams. The wisdom goddess intricately shapes our being from the abundant cosmos emanating from the very heart of the pleroma. So the Gnostic texts and the Gnostic belief systems, the idea that all nature is directly coming from a specific interpretation that aligns with Sophia and the Gnostic cosmology. And I just wanted to give John Lamb Lash some recognition with this quote here. The life force of the planet is animated and animating, giving expression to the creatures who sense they are alive. Their perception that the world is alive, not that the mere belief is animism. So again, it's the belief versus the inner knowing.